Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays in Stores podcast brought to you right here on the Crossover Media Network. My name is Kanaye, and today we get to talk about a UConn win for change, as opposed to last time where they unfortunately dropped that game to Villanova. But this time they were able to take home a 68-60 win against Georgetown on the road at Capital One Arena. I believe that's where they play. Um, but yeah, all around good game from UConn today. There's definitely some things they got to clean up. They're pretty sloppy down the stretch, specifically late in the within the last 5 minutes of the game. But I mean, there's definitely some good things to take away from this win. There's a few guys who I think are finally starting to continue to move along, like Jalen Stewart, Jaden Ross. But I think the biggest storyline today for UConn was Alex Karaban bouncing back after missing those two free throws, which would have won that game against Villanova the other day. He came back, scored 19 today, and it was just really good to see after the unfortunate things that some people had to say about him in the media and just online. But yeah, I think there's definitely some things to take away from this game today. So I'll be covering that, and I'll also do a quick preview for the matchup against Creighton, which is slated for next Saturday. But before we get into that, the algorithm is what drives content on YouTube. Engage with this content, anything you see on this channel, this podcast, or anything else which we might be covering in any way you can. Subscribe, comment, tell other people about it. It all helps with being able to put this out to more people. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. So UConn took home the win 68-60 against Georgetown. This is a Georgetown program that hasn't been particularly good over the last few years, but I have to give Ed Cooley a lot of credit. I know I said I'm not the biggest Ed Cooley guy, but I think he's done a very good. I mean, I think he's a good coach, and he's done a lot to really put this Hoya program back in the right direction with his recruiting, some of the transfers he brought in, and the freshman he was able to land in Thomas Sorber. I mean, that's a guy who's really, really good, and they showed some of the stats during the game. His stat lines this year have been very reminiscent of many of the Georgetown greats like Patrick Ewing and Dikembe Mutombo, Alonzo Mourning. So I mean, that's good on Ned Cooley. He's definitely really transformed the path that Georgetown's been going on as of late since they had Ewing as a coach. But yeah, that Thomas Sorber, that dude's really good. It's going to be tough for Georgetown to retain him, not only with the transfer portal, but the way he's playing. He might be a first round pick this year, and he's definitely someone who's going to give Lee McNeely a run for freshman of the year in the Big East. But yeah, um, pretty good game from UConn overall. There were definitely points where the defense looked really bad in the first half. I understand foul trouble was a reason why that was the case. Hassan Diarra got in foul trouble fairly early, picked up two quick ones. Solo ball, no, not solo ball. Jalen Stewart picked up three fouls pretty early on as well. He played really good defense against Eric Dixon in that Villanova game, and from what I saw from him today defensively, he looked pretty good too with his rotations and being able to close out on shooters. Again, having that length at the wing position obviously helps, and I mean, I think Jalen Stewart has a chance to be really good. Um, I mean, more than a 3-and-D guy, but like a guy who's going to be able to hit shots next year and definitely defend at a fairly high level, I think, as he continues to play more. Um, he didn't score in this game today, but I think there were some flashes of good things. He made some nice passes. And again, yeah, the defense I thought he played was pretty solid when he was on the floor. So yeah, speaking of the Hassan Diarra foul trouble, that led to us seeing some Ahmad Noel minutes today, which was definitely really cool to see. I know this is a guy that many UConn fans have talked about. They think that he should be playing more, that he hasn't been getting the playing time that he probably should. And I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. I do want to see Noel get some more action, but I don't know at this very point if that's the best thing for this team. Of course, if you're in a comfortable position, then I don't see why not. But today, I think he handled it pretty well. There were definitely freshman moments he had where he needs to be more decisive. He can't hold the ball as long as he did once or twice when he got stripped or got the threw an inadvertent pass or dribbled into the corner and kind of made things tricky as the shot clock was winding down. But he had two great takes to the hoop. And I mean, you can definitely see that that's a guy who's going to be good in 2-3 years, maybe however long he ends up staying at UConn. And I mean, I've told some people he's the makeup and I think the potential that's there definitely reminds me of Marcus Sasser, who played at Houston a few years back. And I think Amando has a chance to be really, really good. And I mean, even next year too, depending on who UConn's able to retain past the season. And I mean, I'm assuming he's a guy who's probably going to stay 3 to 4 years. And I mean, in that third or in his junior senior season, he could be really, really good. And one of the best guards in the country. But of course, that's not the case right now. And he's seen limited action this year. He got some runs in Maui, but since then hasn't really played a lot. But today, I think he did a fair job. He's definitely tough. He's definitely plays tough. He doesn't back down on defense, which I think is really nice to see. And I'm sure he's been learning a lot from Diarra. I'm sure he's learning stuff from Mahaney and Solo. And I think that's a guy who's has all the tools around him to be a really, really good player, not only next year but in going forward too. But yeah, I mean, I think the number one story from this game was again Alex Karaban turning things around after. I wouldn't say the game he played against Villanova was a terrible game, but it wasn't one of his better games in a UConn jersey. Um, I think him missing those two free throws at the end, which would have led to UConn winning, definitely, I think, put a sour taste in the viewer's eye, which maybe would make them think that he had a really bad game. But that wasn't the case. But yeah, him missing those two free throws was tough, and I think it was really unfair to see the things that people had to say, not only just from college basketball media, just regular fans, but UConn fans too. I mean, I talked about in the last episode. That's a guy who should be receiving no harsh words from any UConn fan. I understand that's a guy who's pretty much automatic from the line, who ended up missing two free throws in a really bright moment. But I mean, he's a starter on two back-to-back national championship teams. He's one of the best winners in the history of college basketball, and he's a guy that isn't necessarily built to be a number one option on a team. I know he is kind of the, in a sense, go-to guy, or the leader of this team, but you can't. He's not really. He doesn't have the archetype to be a go-to scorer, if that makes sense. His game isn't that. His game is he's more so suited to be a number two or number three option. And I'd say in that role, he's arguably the best person in the country when it comes to that. He doesn't do much to necessarily create off the dribble outside of quick head fakes to side step dribbles and like step backs here and there from three. He's not doing anything crazy like any vicious slashes to the hoop or anything where he's going to be pulling up from mid range to do anything of that sort. That's what you see in most number one option go to guys. They obviously have the ability to go to the rim and shoot threes like Alex Caravan can do, but they can do a little bit more in terms of shot clock's running low or late in the game you need a guy to go get you a bucket. That's the guy you throw it to. Alex Caravan isn't necessarily that type of player. He's someone who is really, really smart in being able to read what he's getting off of UConn sets and run off of pin downs and run off of screens and be able to get his shots. And when he's in a position to hit a big shot, he's able to. I mean, the amount of clutch or dagger 3-pointers he's hit in his time playing at UConn it's countless how many he's hit at this point. You saw it this year at Butler. He hit two back-to-back clutch 3-pointers to allow UConn to fully pull away at the end of that game. And I mean, I think that's a guy who, being a starter on back-to-back national championship teams, shouldn't receive any negative words from any UConn fan. And I've talked about how I think the UConn fan base has really become toxic over these last two national championship runs, and one of the more fun and cool fan bases is really kind of I don't know. They just there's a lot of fair weather UConn fans, to put it nicely. There's going to be people who get down on the team when they're playing bad, like we saw in Maui, and then once they start playing good, they hop right back on the bandwagon. That just those fans aren't the real fans, but no one should have a bad thing to ever. No one should ever have a bad thing to say about Alex Karaban, and I think he proved it further today. I mean, that guy's the ultimate winner. He's going to be a first round pick, and he's going to immediately benefit whatever team chooses to draft him. He's a super smart player, probably the smartest player in the country, for being honest. And just what he's able to do. Of course, he doesn't wow you with athleticism. He doesn't do anything in terms of being able to like create his own shot or do anything crazy off the dribble. But he's a guy who can knock down shots when you need them, and he's just someone that's a calming presence on this team. And speaking of the other calm presence on this team, Hassan Diarra. Again, a little bit of a down game stat wise, but I think I mean, I think that's probably attributed to the foul trouble he got in. But two free from the floor day. Again, some of those were caused by the late game struggles and UConn not really running anything in their offense, just burning the clock and just throwing up Hail Mary shots to beat the shot clock. I think three or four of his attempts were because of that. But I mean, what he did defensively, some of the steals he got were just complete momentum shifters. Once Georgetown was trying to make a run back, when the lead crept up to, I want to say 10, and then once again at 15, he was able to get a steal, take it down the court, lay it up, go coast to coast, and then think another time, was able to strip the ball again, pass it over to Samson Johnson for another dunk. Just big momentum shifting plays, and that's what Hassan Diarra does. I've talked about it so much, how it's so cool to see the growth in Hassan Diarra going from a limited bench role 2 years back to being the Big East Sixth Man of the Year last year to now being the starting point guard at this UConn program. It's just so cool to see. Um, yeah, and in terms of Jalen Stewart and Jaden Ross, I talked about Jalen Stewart. I thought, he didn't shoot the ball great today, coming off that big game he had at Villanova. But I think what he did defensively was encouraging. And Jaden Ross in this game scored 7 points. I think I think he went 1 for 3 from the 3-point line. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for him. He didn't have a very good game against Providence and not a very good game against Villanova either. But I still deep down think that he can become that 20-minute a game 3-and-D guy. I mean, the shot looks good. It's just all about him building his confidence and taking that shot and being able to hit it consistently. He was able to knock down three today, which is nice to see. And he had two looks that were good, but kind of went in and out. And there was another point as well where I think he got a defender to jump on the head fake, and he picked up his dribble early and pulled it it was open, but it was a tough mid range shot as opposed to what he probably could have got. I mean, I think he probably could have dunked it there. But yeah, so it's just the small things that Jalen Ross I think needs to improve upon. He has all the intangibles. He has the athleticism, the physical makeup to be a really good player. And I still think that's a guy who has NBA potential. I think Jalen Ross could very much be an NBA player one day. Him and Jalen Stewart both. And I mean, that's just in the games can going forward without Liam, those guys, they got to continue to show what they can bring because UConn's not going to get to their peak this year without Jaden Ross, Jalen Stewart, and Aiden Mahaney really being able to reach their potentials of being really solid bench guys who can come in and give you energy minutes and give the stars um, the breath they need when they're tired and need to go to bench. And there's not a significant drop off like how you saw with UConn last year. I understand UConn would really only go seven deep, maybe eight with Jalen Stewart coming in here and there. But still, when Hassan Diarra and Samson Johnson were in the game, there was no drop off in talent. This year, there is a little bit of a drop off, but I think we're starting to see that those guys come along a little bit more. And it's just really cool to see where they were at the beginning of the year to how they're kind of starting to come along now. I understand it's been in flashes and hasn't been consistent yet, but once it does get consistent, which I think it will, then this UConn team is going to go to a new level. In terms of Aiden Mahaney in this game, I think his first half was a lot better than the second half. I think it was because he was able to play a little bit off ball more with they had solo ball running the point at times, which is cool to see. I mean, I thought solo ball at the immediate end of last season, I thought solo ball was going to be the point guard this year. But obviously he's playing off guard this year. He's playing the two, and he's done really well in that position. I mean, solo ball, he's played great. I'll touch on that in a little bit. But Aiden Mahaney, his minutes today, he played 16 minutes, scored 6 points, 1 for 2 from three. That 1 3 he hit was definitely nice. I think he saw the mismatch he had with the bigger man on him and was able to take advantage of it. Catch him a little bit off guard with the pull-up jumper. Big shot, definitely good for his confidence. And I definitely think he's improved defensively a lot. Um, I understand at the beginning of the year he was a complete defensive liability. I'm still not confident in Hayden's defense just yet, but it's evident he has improved. He's definitely showing a lot more toughness on the defensive side of the ball, and I think you see Hurley whenever Aiden Mahaney does anything positive, whether it's scoring or getting a stop on defense, getting a steal. You always see Hurley like yelling at him more than everyone else. I think that's Hurley's just trying to motivate him as much as he can. I think the biggest thing for Aiden is just continue to build on his confidence, This is a guy whose confidence was completely shattered in Maui. And even after that Baylor game where he kind of emerged, he had a bad game against Gonzaga. But I mean, he's had moments like, again, in that Providence game, or even today, there was a play where late in the shot clock, he's able to drive on checking. I'm trying to remember. Micah Peavy, who's one of the best defenders in the country. He was able to take it to the rim and score on Micah. And I mean, that's a guy who I think later in this game, there were 3 to 4 shot clock violations with UConn kind of not doing anything offensively, really just looking at burn clock. They can't do that. I think they just need to continue to run their stuff. I understand you were up pretty big, and this was a game which probably wasn't going to get out of hand in terms of letting up a comeback. But I, Hurley talks about this team not having its killer instinct. This is part of the reason why you need to run. They need to run. I don't know if that's a fault on it's probably most likely a fault on the players in terms of them just not really running the sets as precisely as they would had the game been closer. But I think you need to continue to run your stuff. You need to get guys open looks, and you can't just burn clock and just chuck up. It was really sloppy. It was a tough watch towards the end of that basketball game. But obviously it didn't end up hurting them. But what I don't understand, I've talked about in the past, I don't get Hassan Diarra being the guy who takes these late clock shots. I would much rather have Solo Ball take those. And I mean, Aiden Mahaney's on the floor too. You recruited Aiden Mahaney to kind of be the only guy who's can go and create his own shot and get his own look off the dribble. And you have him just sitting in the corner, and which is what I tend to notice a lot when Aiden Mahaney is on the floor. He tends, I don't know if that's um, just the set's not being run as properly as we saw with last year with like Cam Spencer and Cam Spencer running off the screens and stuff like that. But I mean, you have Mahaney in the corner. I don't understand why you have Hassan taking some of these crazy shots when you have a guy who you specifically recruited out of the transfer portal to be able to go and get you a shot on his own, and you just have him sit in the corner. I think Mahaney showcased at several points this year that he's able to do that, and I think it would do more for his confidence if he's allowed to get more of those shots off and even make some, which I know he's able to do. We just haven't seen it fully yet. But but yeah, so I mean, just again, Mahaney, Stewart, Ross, just continue improvement for those guys. And then getting back to Solo, like I just touched on, I mean, this dude. I've said it. I think this guy's a legit lottery pick type of guy. Um, I know right now he's not on any draft boards, which is just completely shocking to me. Of course, I wouldn't hate if Solo Ball had to come back for his junior year. I'm totally fine with that. But this is a guy who legitimately has real NBA potential. Um, he's only 6'3", I think 185 pounds maybe. But again, the long wingspan. He has the physical makeup too to be a solid NBA player. He's shooting the ball so well this year from three. Very reminiscent of Jordan Hawkins. I know I say this all the time, but it really is. I mean, he knocked down 3 threes within, I want to say, almost 10 minutes of game time within each other. Um, and I mean, it's just every time he shoots, it looks like it's going in. And I just he's been really really good. And he did a lot more today too. He was able to get to the mid range and hit a shot too. He was able to get on the offensive glass once or twice, I believe. And I know he got a putback at one point. And I mean, yeah, he's been a really really good player this year. He's stepped up. That was definitely someone who I thought was going to have the biggest freshman sophomore leap out of this sophomore class, and definitely happy with my prediction there. But I mean, yeah, Solo definitely has stepped up in the absence of Liam, and he's gonna. I think he's just gonna continue to get better. Again, you just like to see him improve a little bit more defensively and do a little more playmaking as well. Only 1 assist in this game. I think he had 4 against Villanova, but yeah, I mean, that's just such a talented player, and he's only gonna get better. In terms of Samson Johnson and Terrace Reed in this game, Terrace Reed only played 12 minutes. Um, Felt early on that this was maybe going to have to be a game where Terrace Reed gets sees the larger volume of playing time, just because Thomas Sorber seemed to have Samson Johnson's number pretty early in the game. But Samson Johnson did a good job turning the game around, where it kind of looked rough at certain points. I think he fought defensively. And just on the offensive side of the ball, still a little sloppy. That's what he's kind of been last year too, and the year before. There are certain points he has to catch the ball, and he's not doing that. But I think overall, good game. Again, Hurley talked about it. The center tandem with Terrace and Sampson, it's going to go matchup by matchup. Sampson's probably going to start every game, but if there's like that Providence game, a very physical game where Sampson just can't really bring the physicality and toughness inside that they need, you have Terrace right off the bench to play high volume minutes if you need it, and I think that's really great to have at your for your two centers to be able to shift in between. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything that I was able to take away from this Georgetown game. Good win overall. Nice to bounce back. Georgetown's a pretty solid defensive team, and again, the program is up on the uprise. They blew out Creighton by 20 or maybe even more several weeks back. They played Marquette tough, and yeah, I definitely think seeing the outcome of this game stacked up against how some of the other teams in the Big East performed against Georgetown, definitely encouraging to see if you're a UConn fan for sure. Um, and yeah, just a good win overall. Good on AK to bounce back. Big win. And yeah, so let's talk about this Creighton game. So next Saturday, it'll be played at Gamble Pavilion. I'm sure the crowd's going to be great. Last year, when Creighton came to Gamble, I believe that was when Creighton was ranked 18th in the country, and UConn, that was the first game UConn played after they were ranked number one in the AP poll. That was an absolutely electric atmosphere. I don't see why it won't be again next Saturday. And yeah, today Creighton took home an 80-76 win against Butler. So pretty similar in terms of UConn. Pretty similar in terms of the final score that UConn had against Butler. I think UConn additionally only won by 4, my mistake. But yeah, I mean, again, I think the number one thing is Ryan Kalkbrenner came back to Creighton for his grad year, and I had him in my preseason predictions as a first team All American. I definitely think that's a guy that has a chance to still be that this year. He's played really well. He's one of the most underrated players in the country. He's a guy who doesn't foul on defense. I believe I saw a stat that he's never fouled out a game in his collegiate career, which is insane to hear about a 7-footer, particularly in the Big East, one of the most physical conferences in the country. Which, speaking of which, that officiating today was a joke. The amount of fouls called both ways was insane. The biggest officiating this year has been terrible, if I'm being honest. Um, it's been bad. I just hope it improves. It's been really, really bad. But getting back to Kalk, I went 11 for 17 for the field today, 3 for 5 from three. That was something he really improved upon from last year. This year, of course, he was able to step outside and hit it this year, but now he's doing it with consistency this year. Scored 26, had 6 blocks. I mean, that's a guy, again, one of the most disciplined defenders in the rim protectors in the country. Um, of course, with the loss of Baylor Shireman and Trey Alexander from last year to this year, you knew Kalkbrenner was going to have to give more on the offensive side, and he's done it this year. Just a really good player, and it's going to be tough. I don't know who they're going to throw at Kalkbrenner. That might be a game where Terrace has to play a lot, just because I don't know if Sampson. I mean, Sampson did actually a really good job last year when Creighton came to Gamble to play UConn. Kalkbrenner had one of his worst games of the season that game, so maybe Sampson's able to kind of throw Kalkbrenner off with his ability to kind of change the pace and be a little bit of a rim runner and get out in transition. So that might that could be something to watch out for. But if that's not the case, then you have Terrace to throw in. Of course, I just mentioned brings the physicality, brings the toughness, could easily get on the glass, have a big game that way. But yeah, Colk's really good. Um, of course, they lost Pop Isaacs this year. Just a brutal, brutal blow for Creighton. I mean, this is a team that definitely had Final Four potential, I think, with Pop Isaacs, but losing him to the hip surgery, that it sucks to see. It really does. They were finally starting to hit their stride too. They had a big game at home against number one Kansas at the time when they were ranked that high. Um, Isaacs was really good in that game as well. But yeah, I mean, they've had to have other guys pick up the score, and Stephen Ashworth has done a fair job of doing that. He had 12 rebounds in this game. He almost landed a triple double, actually. 22 points, 9 assists, 12 rebounds. That's definitely surprising seeing Stephen Ashworth get 12 rebounds. I don't think I don't know if that's a box score mishap. I don't know if I believe that, but if that's true, then wow, good on Ashworth. Didn't think there, I didn't think Ashworth would have to get more than like 7 rebounds in a game, but Yeah, I mean, that's a guy who you can't let get hot. He got really hot when UConn went to Omaha last year to play at the Chi Health Center. Got really hot from three and destroyed UConn that way that game. But there's also a guy who Sandiar could get up in. He can get up in Ashworth's grill and cause a little bit of trouble. Again, I talked about the height limitations with Ashworth and Creighton not being able to necessarily run their sets to exactly as crisply as McDermott wants them to. But uh, but yeah, I mean, you never know. I think Hassan's going to do a good job guarding Ashworth. I hope. They've also had other guys like Jemiah Neal come along. He's played well this year. Um, Definitely. He didn't shoot the ball particularly well. He hasn't shot well as of late, but he's definitely a guy who can get hot from three if you let him. They also got guys like Mason Miller coming off the bench. I thought Mason Miller was going to be a little bit of a bigger role. He hasn't been great lately, but he's still a good shooter. And I mean, again, you can't let this Creighton team get hot. They might not be playing their absolute best basketball this year, but that's a team that when they get hot from three, they will light you up. So UConn's got to really, really lock in on the perimeter defensively. They can't be late to closeouts. They gotta get their hands up. They gotta be long and tough on the perimeter. Additionally, I know I talked about Fedor Zugic, the eligibility questions about him, how that would affect this Creighton team this year. I talked about it a lot in some of the preseason overviews we did for Crossover U. I thought this was a guy that was going to be playing a lot more, and I honestly didn't even know he was declared eligible. That's a guy who was a really good player on the Euro in the top Euro league. He scored 13. He was a 13 point per game scorer, and I thought that was someone who could make Creighton a Final Four caliber team if he were declared eligible, and he has been, but he doesn't play very much. I think the most minutes he's played in a game this year is 6, so that was a little bit shocking to me. But yeah. But overall, I think that's pretty much going to cover everything for this episode. Again, just they got to come out strong against Creighton. I know it's at home, but they gotta they can't let Creighton get hot. You let Creighton get hot, it's gonna get ugly, and they just got to continue to improve defensively. And that sophomore class, Jay Ross, Jay Stu, um, Mahaney's got to get going too. But yeah, just continued improvement, and I think that's what we're going to continue to see, hopefully, from this UConn team. So yeah, again, if you like this podcast, if you like any of the content you see on this channel, please review, subscribe, tell other people about it. All helps with getting it out to more people. And until the next episode, I will see you all next time.